I played tons of football growing up with my friends and family and stuff. And in college, I played for my college for tennis, handball, and basketball.
You actually ended up as the MD of the NBA in India. In all my time here in India, the only place I've ever seen people playing basketball is where I now live in Aizawl in Mizoram.
My first preference was I'd love to be a professional, sportsman, and obviously I wasn't talented enough. Sports, in my opinion, is the purest form of entertainment. Right? When you sit down to watch a sports event, you know nothing about the outcome. The outcome has not been written. The Play Store was, a godsend for all developers in this country, whether it's in e-commerce or whether it's in obviously ride-sharing, streaming. Why is it that the industry hasn't changed the way sports fandom hasn't adapted to that? When I went to watch the finals of the French Open on a streaming platform, this platform said, you want to watch the final, buy an annual subscription. And I was like,
I just want to watch this one thing.
I just want to watch this one game. And I don't think that's fair to a sports fan or a consumer. So we drew inspiration from Unilever. Hindustan Lever actually introduced years back the sachet pricing, where they actually said that we have to get more people to buy your products, you have to reduce the point of entry. How do we actually build this product which can get to all these pieces of content and get to all these sports fans across the country, irrespective of whether there are 5,000 sports fans or 500,000 or 5 million. When you looked at the traditional way the industry was structured, it was going to be extremely difficult for us to make any impactful change within this traditional industry. So then the concept was, let's start something up.
Welcome to a very special episode of Millionaire Mondays in collaboration with Google Play, where we bring you the untold stories of some of India's most incredible app startups. I'm Caleb Friesen, and on the show today, how Yannick Colaço and Prasana Krishnan built a one-stop destination for fans of emerging sports like basketball, F1, MMA, golf, volleyball, and baseball, and turned it into a massive business with more than 100 million users. Sports fandom in India is at an all-time high, but in spite of this, being a sports fan in India can be frustrating, especially if you want to follow more than just Indian cricket and marquee events like the FIFA World Cup or Wimbledon. Let's say, for example, you enjoy watching F1, or golf, or rugby, or volleyball, or women's football and women's cricket. In fact, even with India's favorite sport, cricket, if you want to follow what's happening in, say, the West Indies or county cricket in England, it can be extremely frustrating to find and access this content in India. And the reason is that the following that these leagues have in India is limited. There just aren't millions of people watching these events, but that doesn't mean that folks in India shouldn't have access to enjoy these sporting events. It's unbelievable to me that a global sport like F1, which has close to 60 million fans in India, didn't even have an official broadcaster in the country until early 2024. And this was a pain point not just for sports fans in India, but also Yannick Colaço and Prasana Krishnan, who decided to start a company called FanCode to solve this exact problem. But they didn't just want to give Indians the option to watch these sports all in one place. They also wanted to give them an incredible end-to-end experience as fans too, which is why they built out features like instant highlights, stats overlays on demand, scorecards that fans can access while watching the game to see how their favorite players are performing, and the ability to buy official merchandise for teams and players all on a single platform. To put it another way, FanCode was built for sports fans by sports fans. And as I would find out during my conversation with Yannick Colaço, growing up in Goa actually had a huge impact on the role that sports would go on to play in his life.
Goa has this great culture of sport. And so I was fortunate enough to grow up in this entire community where playing sport was almost a way of life. Right? So when I grew up, I actually played a lot of football while growing up. But I, dabbled in a whole lot of sport. I played tons of football growing up with my friends and family and stuff. And in college, I played for my college for tennis, handball, and basketball. And a lot of what I look at in terms of being in the sports industry is probably an outcome of the fact that my first preference was have loved to be a professional, sportsman. And obviously I wasn't talented enough. So
Was that the path that you wanted to go down now, become a professional athlete?
it's I think every child who ever picks up a ball or a bat wants to, their goal is to become a star. Chances are very low, but their goals. So that's always what I wanted to do. And I played tons of sport. I remember I didn't study much in college, but I remember like growing up in college, I used to like go in the morning basketball practice, evening was tennis practice, and the night sometimes handball. So I didn't have much time to study.
What's interesting though is that these are all like none of these are cricket, right? Which is sort of the sport in India.
Yeah.
Is there a reason why you didn't gravitate towards?
It's actually fascinating. In Goa, when I grew up in the 90s, cricket was not a really big sport, especially in playing. Football was dominant, right? Every single place you could drive down, through villages, and you'd see every single place kids would be playing, and someone would have stopped and watched. So football was massive, and all these other sports were very, very college driven. So I played tons of cricket, but cricket was probably the only sport I didn't play in an organized way. I played tons of like street cricket, tons of cricket with my friends and stuff, and obviously grew up passionate about following cricket because the way the India team performed and stuff like that. But playing cricket, especially in the 90s in Goa, wasn't really a big thing.
Did you play basketball growing up too? Because
I did, yeah, and I did play basketball growing up, and that's something I got a little more serious about basketball because maybe I was a little better in that than everything else, and I played at a national level also basketball.
Oh wow,
yeah, and it's another sport that obviously I just love the way the sport is structured. I love the athletic, the teamwork part of it. It's something which really fascinates me.
Yeah, and fast forwarding a little bit in your career, you actually ended up as the MD of the NBA in India, which I thought was really interesting because in all my time here in India, the only place I've ever seen people playing basketball is where I now live in Aizawl in Mizoram. But everywhere else, it's cricket, it's football, maybe a couple of other sports, but I didn't have any idea that basketball and the NBA specifically even had a presence in this country. How did you end up in that role? And also, how did it shape your perspective on underrepresented sports here in India?
Yeah, so I as I was saying earlier, like I was really fortunate. I was like, because I grew up with sport and was so important to me, I was really obsessed with trying to get into the business of sport. And, out of college in the early 2000s was tough. There weren't really many companies which were in the business. So I joined the sports agency called IMG. And I was fortunate enough from there to work with another sports company called Nimbus. And through all this, besides doing tons of cricket, we did a lot of other sport, right? IMG had this tennis open event, which was an ATP Tour event. Nimbus, we did the first ever professional field hockey league, golf, a whole lot of other events on this. And I was always trying to figure out, how do I add more value in sport? A lot of what we were doing with the industry growing was that, hey, this was building up. But I always felt that sports as a category, as an industry, needs to grow from the bottom up, right? And I always wanted to get involved in grassroots and development and stuff. So in 2013 or 2012, I think, the NBA was looking to set up and kind of expand globally, not just in India. So it was something I was really keen on trying to understand, since I was a big fan of the NBA and basketball also. So I, interestingly, right, in my final stage of discussions, I was in this interview with this legendary person in sport, David Stern, right, who was the commissioner then. And I was in this interview with him in New York, and I asked him exactly the same question, saying the NBA is this massive US brand, which I'm a big fan of. But, how do you see it in India? If you were going to try and sell NBA merch in India, licensing, it's not going to be significant. It's going to take time. And he just spent, so much time of his own time. It was a 30-minute meeting, which he actually spent 2 hours in, explaining about his vision for NBA and basketball globally. And his vision was really about taking the NBA outside of the US to actually make a difference, both in terms of building the sport of basketball, as well as impacts on community, as well as impact on actually developing, team bonding, developing youth around it. In his first trip to India, which was a few months after I joined, we had all these meetings and stuff. He was most enamored by this session that we had in Nagpara, where these young kids, which is a small area in Bombay, where these young kids came out and they were actually playing basketball. And he was like, these kids are so grateful for the opportunity of playing basketball. Why can't we do this for every single child in India? So when I joined the NBA, the mandate was obviously to grow the NBA in India and work as part of the international leadership team. But one of the big focuses was on essentially building grassroots basketball in India. So we actually started this junior NBA program, and we had a partner in the Reliance Foundation who helped us with it, where we tried to actually, what we started doing was incorporating basketball in school curriculum. So we worked with schools, trained PE teachers, gave them the equipment, and actually got kids to learn to play basketball the right way. And I remember, like, in 4 years, we had, by year 4, we had got close to, we were in, I think, over 4,000 schools, and we had close to something like 4 million kids playing basketball through their junior NBA program. So while the commercial side of the NBA is just amazing, and it's obviously something we worked on, I was extremely proud of what we did in developing basketball, aside from the fact that we brought a global game to India for the first time and things like that.
That's an incredible amount of optimism and just that holistic approach to promoting and encouraging a sport in a country that really, up until that point, basketball probably had almost no presence in India. But I'm sure you, being there in that situation and seeing that level of optimism, could have actually taken that kind of mentality and applied it to other sports in the country too, right? Which is kind of what you've done here with FanCode. Did you, at that point, did you already start to think about sort of other opportunities in emerging sports in India? Like, did that kind of rub off on you and shape your perspective going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's that, as well as, all the time I've been in sport in India. The one thing that we've seen, or that I've seen in sport over the last 2 decades, right? Aside from basketball, which, as you said, this fandom keeps growing, right? There's the fandom and the culture of sport in India, especially among kids, has grown significantly since the early 90s, the mid 90s to now, or to when we started FanCode about 5 years back. But what happened was, what we noticed was that while the culture and fandom was growing, the coverage of non-tier 1, let's call it, right, non-marquee events was actually diminishing. And the reason for that was simply because of the way the industry was structured. So if you think about it, 20 years back when we started, 5 years, in the early 2000s, where the level of coverage for the English Premier League in India was more than it was 5 years back. Whereas the level of coverage for the IPL was probably 10 times more than it was. And if you think about the way the industry was structured, or some of it continues to be structured in traditional broadcast, linear television has constraints in terms of the amount of content you can put and distribute. And what that does is it puts pressure on you to be, your business models are incentivized around scale. Because you have limited bandwidth, you have to be able to put that distributed to the largest number of people. And your monetization model is on 2 pieces. It's on a distributor, and whether it's a cable operator or DTH operator, whatever, and it's on an advertising agency. So the model always focused on saying, let me gravitate and put more emphasis on things that scale. And the reality is, when you put more emphasis on something, it's always at the cost of everything else. So, one of the things that the frustrations that I had as a sports fan and someone in the sports industry, and Prasana, my colleague who was my co-founder, who was at that time the head of the Sony sports business, we kept talking about this in a sense that, why is it that the industry hasn't changed the way sports fandom hasn't adapted to that? And when you looked at the traditional way the industry was structured, it was going to be extremely difficult for us to make any impactful change within this traditional industry. So then the concept was, let's start something up, right? And let's start something up which essentially can cater to this, and using this entire backbone of digital telecom infrastructure, which was booming, and how do you actually build this product which can get to all these pieces of content and get to all these sports fans across the country, irrespective of whether there are 5,000 sports fans or 500,000 or 5 million, build a product which can actually provide access of a wide variety of sports to fans across the country so that they can actually connect with the sports that they love.
Was this an opportunity that you identified while you were at the NBA?
So we saw this as a gap, right? Access of sport was a gap, and which was while I was there. Even with the NBA, the amount of content we could actually put out was limited or constrained by, the fact that linear television had certain restrictions. So, for example, the WNBA, we weren't able to get coverage of that, but we had fans of WNBA. They weren't millions of fans, but they are thousands of fans. Why should they not have access to that content? Even in cricket. If you think about, at that point of time, women's cricket, junior cricket, state-level cricket had no coverage. So for us, we were very, again, optimistic of the fact that the fandom exists. There are thousands of events in sport which aren't being covered. And there is this, this digital infrastructure which has been set up where everyone has a mobile phone, that we can actually kind of plug in, and is this a problem we could actually solve, which was access to great sports content.
Had anyone tried to solve that problem in the past? Were there people who tried to set up streaming platforms for emerging sports in India, or was this a brand new original idea that you guys had come up with?
So I think globally, a couple of people had tried it, but eventually always gravitated back to the main marquee event. And it's kind of defeatist because the reality, I mean, even from an advertising sales perspective, right? If you have like a 20-member sales team and you say, hey, you can spend the next 3 days trying to get 100 from this cricket event, which is worth maybe whatever, you try to negotiate that, or you can spend the next 3 days trying to get $1 for all these other events or these 100 events. You automatically incentivize to focus on the bigger events. And that's really what we felt. While others had tried it, at least I felt that they hadn't put the amount of commitment behind doing something like this, which is what any startup needs, right? A startup can't be something that you do for 3 months, 4 months, and you do it part-time. You have to be fully immersed in it, and you have to be obsessed with actually solving the problem you're trying to solve.
I think the jump into entrepreneurship is something that it's scary for a lot of people. And I'm sure it was scary for you. Your job at the NBA was comfortable. You probably could have stuck with that job for the rest of your life, right? You could have made an entire career with this one organization. And yet instead, you decided to pursue entrepreneurship. At what point was it I'm imagining it's towards the end of your time at the NBA where you're thinking, I think it's time for me to take this leap into something that I believe in. Take me back to that time and kind of explain what you were thinking about.
Yeah, so we spoke a little bit about the problem, right? And I had this immense belief that this problem needed to be solved. But you're right in a sense that to be able to take a jump and get into entrepreneurship is something that requires a level of optimism, right? Which I think I had and I continue to have. But I think the two things really helped me in that kind of period. One was obviously having a co-founder who had similar beliefs so you can kind of bounce stuff off each other. And the second was the investors that we got, and it's a really interesting kind of when we were talking about and putting together the ideas about, how do we do this? What's the right way? Do we raise capital? Do we do this, from the start? There's already an industry which exists, so it's not like. So we were doing a lot of this, and at that point, Harsh Jain and Bhavit, who had this entire Dream Sports, their Dream 11, the fantasy game, and Dream Sports, and I have tremendous amount of admiration for what Harsh and Bhavit had built in Dream 11 as a startup. So I actually reached out to him and said, we've known each other for a while, said, just for advice, saying that, how do I go around something like this? And like Prasana and he and Bhavit are also mad sports fans. And when we started talking about it, he said, listen, this is something that, within Dream Sports, I'd really like to do. We've already thought about it. We've done some kind of work around building this content ecosystem within Dream Sports. So he basically said, would you consider coming within Dream Sports and doing it? And, I think having him and Bhavit, who had seen a startup grow from zero to wherever they were already at that point and where they've got to now, having them kind of say, hey, this is a great idea. And this is something that we're willing to back without really going through any business plan or anything. It was just a conversation. I think that gave us tremendous amount of confidence. So we actually sat and we had a couple of conversations, and they were talking to their investors. They were in the middle of a fundraise also. And I actually remember, I had a call with Harsh during the Christmas break, and I was in Goa, my family, and he was like, let's sit down together and talk about this. And I was like, let's just do it tomorrow. So I flew back. We sat down over lunch, the four of us. And I think the principle of what we wanted to do, we kind of agreed on there. And it was, really exciting to be able to, first of all, have a set of people in a room who all shared that same vision. How you got there, we all knew that we'd have to work around there. I mean, there was no perfect answer. And they obviously had a whole set of investors who invested in Dream Sports who were willing to back the project.
Wow. You talked about the vision and sort of everyone sharing that same vision. But initially, I know the scope, at least the sports that you were focusing on, it was quite a bit more limited and more conventional sports than the ones that you were offering now for your viewers, right? I think there was cricket, football, hockey, kabaddi, and basketball, if I'm not wrong. Those are the 5.
So we actually started, as I said earlier, right? And I just want to spend like a moment talking about the category of sports itself, right? And I think that's really important in terms of understanding what FanCode does and how we kind of build that out. So sports, in my opinion, is the purest form of entertainment, right? When you sit down to watch a sports event, you know nothing about the outcome. The outcome has not been written, like most entertainment, like movies and stuff like that. So whether it's going to be a tight game, it's going to get to the last ball, or whether it's going to go into overtime in basketball, or whether it's going to be whether the star is going to shine or he's going to be completely, not do well in the game. All of that is being written. That script it's unscripted. It's literally being written as you're watching. And that, I think, that's what makes sports so compelling. And I think that's what is the driver of the passion that fans have around sport. So when we were thinking about starting this streaming platform for sport, it was very clear that the mindset had to be different from having this generic platform which had sports and entertainment and a whole lot of that, because what we were delivering was a unique proposition. So when we kind of started, we said that obviously live is the most important piece. Everything around sport, whether a fan watches a highlight or they watch a pre-match show or they watch, read a result, it's all a derivative of that live event. So live was always going to be extremely critical for us too. So when we said that we want to try and start testing out our product, looking at live, we always knew that cricket was going to be the most important, was going to be the first port of call. Because as I said earlier, cricket itself didn't have much coverage. It had the big events, but beyond that, there was hardly any coverage. The Bangladesh Premier League had no broadcast in India. Various T20 leagues across the world, domestic cricket, women's cricket, under-19 cricket had no coverage. So for us, it was very clear that we said that let's look at the sport which we know has a big funnel in terms of fan following, and let's start building our product in providing access there first, and then slowly start expanding out from there. And that's really what we did. We first launched our product. We actually, before we could go live, we said, let's just get our product out. It was during the IPL. It's the time everyone is most excited about, cricket. Let's just start testing a product with a live scores product, right? Which again, is not a live event, but it kind of goes on the back of live. So I think on the first day we did some activation around it. We worked on, obviously within the Google Play Store to get it out to consumers. We had 200,000 downloads and we had 195,000 uninstalls. Right? Obviously, distribution doesn't guarantee success. I mean, you can get to a consumer, but obviously a product was nowhere close to being ready for consumers. So then we went back to the drawing board and we realized that, getting it out is great, but getting the right product out there, getting consumer feedback, and that was a great learning for us. So because we got back into it, we went to say that, hey, live scores is not enough. The live coverage of access and live scores of IPL, everyone covered it, right? There were a whole lot of people. Go back to what we were actually building, which was access to sports or events which are underserved in this country.
Oh, so at the beginning it was just live scores.
We just tested out with an app, right?
Sure.
So let's go live scores. The IPL is going on. Let's go live scores on the product while we build our live stream workflow on the architecture. So then we took a step back, and then we started, again building the entire live streaming piece that we had. And then we said that we were going to go extremely deep in terms of cricket first, to be able to test and see what's working, what's not working, make sure that the entire architecture, the workflow, everything was sorted, and then we would kind of expand into more sports.
Yeah, and building a great platform. I mean, obviously, it sounds like it was a very iterative process for you, but also I think the piece of that that's even more important is, who are the people building it, right? The team behind it. So how did you guys look at finding the right talent for FanCode in those early days?
Yeah, I think that was something which was really interesting, right? I think because we were very clear that building a direct-to-consumer platform, you need to have the best talent, right? Because a lot of it is, a streaming platform. The quality of your software is essentially everything. So for us, we were competing with massive other companies in the tech space for talent, as well as other startups which had a lot of funding backing them. And we leaned into what we were, or what we continue to be, and that we leaned into the fact that we are sports, right? So we focused on saying, how do you get sports fans into FanCode? And that was really the sales pitch, because for us, always as part of an interview process, initially I used to always tell people who are sports fans, you can't really get excited about ride sharing, right? I mean, it's not something you can get up every morning and say, yeah, I'm going to solve ride sharing problems today. But you can get excited in the morning and say, hey, I'm going to try and get this basketball fan better access. I'm going to try and create more features to him to get him a better experience if you're a sports fan. So we really leaned into that. And, as you can see in our office and stuff, we really lean into what we are. Our DNA is sports. So everything we do in the way we work, even in terms of how we work together, our culture, a lot of it is derived from working together as a team, as a sports team. We use this example all the time, in a sense that in a football game, you can't have 11 strikers, right? You'll never win. In a cricket game, you can't have 11 batsmen who are great openers. There needs to be balance. So the collective needs to be better than the individuals, than the sum of the individuals. And that's something that we keep leaning into in terms of even our culture. When we talk about ownership, when we talk about being transparent, being user first, it's about working together as a team and making sure that the success of the team is of paramount importance. And that's really what we try and lean into and focus on.
Wow. So I know you did say that you faced that setback early on where a lot of people installed and uninstalled, but it does seem like at a certain point in 2019, things were working out well enough for you to actually have a pretty massive user base at such an early stage. I think by July of 2019, there were 1 crore people using the app. And I say app here, but I'm actually curious, how much of the traffic was coming to the website? Because this is still 2019, this is still very recently after the sort of appification of the Indian internet, right? Now, if you go to any tier 2, tier 3 village, everything's happening on apps, right? Everyone's using their smartphone. People aren't, www. Right? That doesn't really happen. That story didn't play out here in India the same way that it did in, for example, the United States. So how much of the traffic was coming to the website versus the actual app on the Google Play Store?
So I think very early we kind of had decided that the best experience we could actually give users was going to be on the app. So the web, again, given the resource, the people that we had, how do you prioritize, right? And for us, the prioritization was always, to begin with, was always the app, especially in being able to move users from one piece of content to the other and things like that. So the Play Store was, a godsend for all developers in this country, whether it's in e-commerce or whether it's in obviously ride-sharing, streaming. It was a great way for us to be able to look at these aggregated audiences and how do you actually get to them. And obviously things like uninstall gave us information, right? Ratings gave us information. So it gave us very, very live and real-time feedback in terms of what worked, what didn't work. So discovery as well as feedback was a great, the Play Store was a great help for it.
Sure. And you're talking about aggregated audiences.
Yes.
I'm also really curious because like sport is a massive category, right? And especially in a country like India where there's so much diversity about the sports that people, I know everyone's into cricket. I mean, you can go anywhere in the country and cricket seems to be the one common denominator. But when it comes to other sports, certain sports are more popular in metros versus tier 2 cities versus tier 3 and beyond. And so I'm just curious how much of your traffic was coming from, say, like tier 2 and tier 3, and how much of it was coming from the metros?
So I think that's one of the interesting challenges and opportunities that we have, right? As we aggregate all these sports events across different sport, the audiences also kind of morph depending on the type of sport, type of event. Golf and Formula One is more metro, whereas Kabaddi is probably more tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. If you even look at the devices, again, golf and Formula One is more connected TVs, whereas it's more mobile for other products, for other events. And one of the challenges that we've always had is that we have all these events happening simultaneously. So, over a weekend, sometimes we have like over 200 live matches across 12 different sports. And we need, given what we spoke about how important live is, we need to get to the relevant audiences across the country for that right piece of content. And that's something that the Google Play Store has really helped us in. One of the interesting things was, when we were like as FanCode, when you feature yourself on the Google Play Store, you have limited kind of space to kind of describe what you do, right? You talk about events. And then suddenly you have on a weekend, you have 200 events, right? Across 12 sports. So there's only so much space you can actually use to be able to tell everyone who comes there, oh, I have this, I have Kabaddi, I have Formula One, I have golf. So Google actually introduced this thing on the Play Store recently, which was customized store listings, where we could essentially customize the appearance of that depending on the requirement of the user. So a user who came to watch under-19 cricket, we could customize the store listing for them differently to a user who came to watch Formula One. So that really helped in terms of being able to make sure that the user understood that what they came for was properly being presented and available on our product. And then, of course, the other challenge that we continuously are working on is as user gets on the product, how do you make sure they get to their piece of content most relevant to them as quickly as possible without having to see or go through the other content on the product. So that's something from a user experience and a product that we keep working on.
Sure. It is important to highlight when you guys were starting this in 2019, everything was free, right? There was no sort of monetization of these viewers. Obviously, that was something that you guys were thinking about sort of later on down the road you would introduce. But was it clear at that point what form that monetization would take? Or were you kind of feeling things out and thinking, okay, could we go in this direction or that direction? Because right now you have like multiple forms of monetization. You've got merchandising, right? You've also got pay-per-view, you've got subscription. And so, I'm just curious to know, how are you guys looking at the actual revenue generating side of the business back in 2019?
So we were, as I said earlier, right, we were extremely fortunate that we had a set of investors who believed in what we were trying to build. So it was very clear that as we started, the mandate was say, listen, build a great product, get the consumers in, and then we'll start looking at the monetization kind of levers. I think we were also clear at that point of time that direct to consumer was going to have to be the monetization lever that we leaned most into. And at all points of times, you kind of always have this, there's a lot of chatter from the outside because it's new, right? First of all, I remember in 2019, some people saying in a good way, they weren't trying to be discouraging, but they were saying in a good way, saying that, are you sure people will watch cricket outside of India cricket? Are you sure people will watch, golf, football, women's cricket? And then, we were really, really pleased to see that hypothesis was being proven, right? As you said, we got all those downloads without showing any major cricket event, without showing those marquee events. Bangladesh Premier League, the first time we did it, was free, of course. We had over 1 million registered users who came and watched it. The engagement was tremendous. And we were able to build that proof of concept to be able to take it to the next stage. And then again, as we were starting to say, how do we start monetizing consumers, by selling to them directly? Again, there were a lot of people who were kind of talking about, people watch this, it's free. People watch anything for free. Will they pay for it? And that was something that we were always very clear that we'd be able to get people to pay for it, but we were very clear that we could not rely on the traditional model of saying, hey, here's a subscription, pay for it, and then you get to watch one piece of content. We needed to innovate. And I think it was less about innovating from looking at what traditional models work, but it was more about innovating and saying, how do you add value to a consumer? But we had two very key research points that we had. Was one, that the base of users, and this again in 2020 when we started direct-to-consumer subscriptions and the sachet pricing and stuff. In 2020, the user base of users paying for content was actually not very large, because the entry point for paying for watching paid content was extremely high. So we were very clear that we needed to increase that base. We need to get more users paying for content, especially sport. And the second thing that we were very clear on was that, as a sports fan, as a consumer, I mean, it's a frustration that I had also. When I went to watch like the finals of the French Open on a streaming platform, this platform said, you want to watch the final, buy an annual subscription. And I was like,
I just want to watch this
I
one
just
thing.
want to watch this one game. And I paid for it because I could afford it. But I don't think that's fair to a sports fan or a consumer. So we drew inspiration from FMCG, from the FMCG business, where Unilever, Hindustan Lever, actually introduced years back the sachet pricing, where they actually said that we had to get more people to buy your products, especially products which aren't really essentials. They could be luxury for most people in the country. You have to reduce the point of entry, even if it means reducing the size of the product. So that's what we started doing. We said, we're a new product. We don't have hundreds of millions of dollars to build brand marketing campaigns. We have to build trust with the consumer, and we have to allow them to get the experience. So we did a lot of stuff around match passes where users could come and just watch a single game. They could watch just the event. They could watch, obviously, go to a monthly subscription, annual subscription. And we found that, consumers appreciate that. We are really, really comfortable with the fact that if a consumer consumes a match and doesn't come back, which is very rare, it's essentially our inability to deliver value to him or her. And the fact that most of our consumers, most of our sports fans on FanCode actually, if they do match and tour pass, they normally end up upgrading, is a great testament to like what we're building as a team. And that's great validation of what we're actually building as a product.
Sure. And you mentioned too that that monetization began in 2020, but something else that happened in 2020, of course, was the pandemic, which had a massive impact on the sports industry. I'm curious to know, how did it impact you guys? What was it like to be at FanCode during COVID-19?
It was, I'm not to underestimate what it meant for everyone else, right? Because it was obviously a weird experience for everyone. But I think from a business perspective, it was different for us as a sports company as opposed to most other content companies whose usage actually went up through the roof because everyone was sitting at home. There was no live sport. And as we said earlier, right, sport intrinsically, everything emanates from the live event. So we actually, we didn't have any users because there was no live sport to be able to show to a user, no live coverage to do it. So again, we were extremely fortunate that we had a set of investors who were very clear that, listen, this is going to change. Sport will come back in various formats. It could be, without spectators, it could be closed doors, which happened. Let's actually use this time instead of trying to focus on getting those users back for things outside of what we do. Let's use this time to actually build the product further. So we actually, for us, we used that period to actually build this entire subscription and payment mechanism in-house. And that was, because we did that gave us great flexibility. Even now, it's run completely in-house. The entitlement, the subscription pieces, all of it is built in-house. It gives us tremendous amount of flexibility to test stuff out, run match passes, run bundle passes. And that's what we really did during the pandemic, built that up.
Yeah, I think having investors who believed in what you were doing? I mean, imagine if you were bootstrapped. The pandemic would have just put you out of business.
Absolutely.
Right? Unless you had a bunch of, a rainy day fund or something. When the pandemic started subsiding, though, I think that was a really important moment too, because people aren't going on Google or on the Play Store and searching for FanCode. They're just looking for the sport that they're interested in consuming, probably voraciously, right? Because it's been so long since they got a chance to watch that sport. How did you guys and also it's not 2019 anymore, right? So there's probably a couple of companies that are starting to realize what you guys are doing, and they're thinking, this is a great opportunity. We should also get into this space. So how did you rise above the noise and actually make sure that FanCode was the first thing that people saw when they were searching for the sport that they were interested in consuming? I'm talking end of 2020, 2021 time period. I know there were waves of the pandemic, but how did you guys pull that off?
So I think a combination of things, right? I think the first, you rightly point out, the draw of the sport and the event itself was always going to be more important than the draw of FanCode. Even when we market FanCode, we always market the event on FanCode. So I think the intent of users to watch live was so strong, especially of these sports fans, that we did a bunch of marketing. We did a bunch of kind of optimization to make sure we surfaced up when users search for it. Google also, I think, has done things around live sport in a thing called One Box, where they also surface to users where the live sport is, which we worked also very closely with them. And that's how we've kind of worked with other stakeholders in the ecosystem to make sure that users who were searching for us, searching for the event which was on FanCode, found it easily. And as we said, things like custom store listings and things like that also really helped to make sure that as a user came down the funnel, they knew that what they were searching for was being made available to them on FanCode. So getting users on, I think the ecosystem really helped. Retaining users, that was something that, I've got to really put it to the team that we've put together, because they built this product and the experience, which is essentially what has retained and kept those users on our platform.
Yeah. So it sounds like that time period, sort of towards the end of the pandemic, moving into 2021 was a pretty critical time period, and also a time of immense growth for the company. What kind of growth did you guys see once the pandemic was coming to an end?
So the post-pandemic base was very small, right? So the growth was 100x, because it was a very small base. But I think we've seen consistently, post building up that base again, in the last 2 years, we've seen consistently 3 to 4x growth in terms of users and just viewers on our platform. I think one of the interesting things was post-pandemic. I think the first event we put behind a paywall also, which actually was the Caribbean Premier League, we actually started that off with this, I think it was like a 9 rupee and a 5 rupee match pass. And the response was just phenomenal. One, because obviously, as you said, no one had seen live sport for a while, especially cricket fans, right? Where's the live cricket? And second, because I think people just found it so, both in terms of the entry point, which was small, and also in terms of the experience the team built using UPI and a whole lot of other kind of ways to get in to be able to make that purchase was so seamless that I think that was great validation of the business model that we were trying to bring. And that was, I think, really, really good for us.
Dream Sports ended up investing $50 million into FanCode, which is a lot of money.
Yeah, it is.
But I always think of investment as, it is obviously just an indication that the investor believes that they're going to get a sizable return on that investment, right? That's the number one thing. But I also feel like oftentimes the size of the investment and when it's coming in and what it's going to be used for, that is sort of a representation of what the investor feels about the investee, right? The company that they're putting the money into. What would you say Dream Sports investment into FanCode said about their perspective on your business?
I just think the messaging was belief, right? Belief in what we are trying to build. I think from a strategic perspective, Dream Sports has always had this vision of making sports better, right? And being very, very locked into the sports ecosystem and making an impact on it. After the investment in FanCode, Dream Sports has also started, Dream Sports Foundation, where they, do a lot of work in grassroots sports. They have a travel experience company called Dream Set Go. They have a sports gaming company called Dream Game Studios. So they've been very clear that this is the space that they want to invest in and want to kind of build. So as I said earlier, I think for us, it was great validation of the fact that we were on the right path. And we continue working extremely closely with the founders of Dream Sports and our investors, as well as our sister companies like the fantasy game Dream 11, to make sure that we can kind of leverage off each other's learnings, leverage of what we can actually build, because eventually all of us are trying to build value in the sports ecosystem.
I'm curious, we talked about the monetization, the sort of revenue model that you guys follow. It is clearly leaning in that pay-per-view direction. Subscription is also there, but I think pay-per-view, if I had to guess, I would imagine that's a sizable chunk of your revenue. Why didn't you guys go in the opposite direction of doing an ad-sponsored model? Like, I'm just curious. That seems like it would also be. I'm sure you got a lot of advice back in 2019 that no, that's the route to go, because this is India and nobody's going to pay for sports.
That's a great question, and the answer is honestly, really, it's to do with the product that we were putting out. The reality is that we always went down, we talked about the traditional broadcast industry around sports being focused on, events which you could get 100 million users in one event and then monetize that through ads and obviously their distribution partnerships and stuff. So the ads at that level requires scale. Whereas we were focused on the other part where we said instead of 100 million users for one event, we are going to focus on 100 events, or maybe 1,000 events, which gets us 100,000 events, users per event. And the reality is that when you start splitting that up, it is extremely difficult to get advertisers on, because you're not able to hit scale on each one of these events. So we were very conscious in the fact that we had to build this where the consumer could essentially help us build our business model out. And I also think it's the largest form of validation, right? In a sense that if a consumer is willing to open their purse and pay you for the content, there is no bigger validation for what you're doing as a product in the market. I mean, ads you can get on scale on different ways, which is also very difficult. We've actually now started to get into advertising also, but we always were very clear that we needed to get the first piece right. And as I said, it's less pay-per-view, more like transaction video on demand, kind of, or transaction live video kind of thing. But that was always about trying to get users in and trying to get them to experience the platform. Most of our retaining users, I would say like over 95% of them don't buy the single match pass anymore.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean,
that's how you got things started, but now it's...
So for new users, we still offer it.
Yeah.
Right? We still offer it in various pieces and stuff and various formats. And we do a lot of experimentation. We use a lot of analytics in terms of even the product pricing, that we do a lot of experimentation around, a lot of A/B testing. But we've always found that once you've had the experience of FanCode, then they will always go either for a monthly or a full tour or an annual pass, because then there's a level of trust that they've already built with the platform.
Sure. And apart from this, experiments in advertising, you guys have also been, you've gotten into merch too, which I think is fascinating. I mean, that is a massive global industry, right? Multi-billion-dollar industry globally, licensed, authentic merchandise. Whereas in India, specifically in this local market, it hasn't taken off in the same way that it has in the rest of the world. And so I'm curious to know, like, how are you guys looking at that? Why did you decide to get into that? Because I feel like all signals would have been pointing towards, no, this isn't going to work in India. People aren't going to spend extra money to buy licensed merch. They're happy with their replicas, but you guys seem to have thought differently.
Yeah, and I think the principle of doing this is not different from how we started saying that we're going to, provide access to underserved content. No one covered these events before, right? So I think all of us, we always started saying that we're trying to add value to sports fans. What problem are we solving for? And while we were very clear about the content problem, this is something that, we've been toying around, talking about for a while. And we did some research into it. And as you said, there's a global business, tremendous amount of sports fans, they're passionate. Like, what are the issues here? And we kind of found that there are essentially three major problems in this entire ecosystem of sports merch, which needed to be addressed. The first was in terms of very simply affordability, right? You had this original jersey, which was priced at 4,000 rupees, 3,000 rupees, 5,000 rupees, which honestly is most of India cannot afford. And you had no options. Even in the US, when the NBA has their products, they have a replica, they have a swingman, and they have like a fan jersey. So there is an entire range of products. So the affordability was a very important part that we thought needed to be addressed by providing larger ranges of products to be able to enter. The second was simply wearability, right? The entire industry of sports merch is not only about jerseys, because you wear those jerseys during a game, you wear it, when you go to a stadium. You also need to build products which can be worn, which have the sports brand, and you can express your fandom with, but they can be worn when you go out, you go for a run, you go meet friends, like just plain cotton tees or, mugs or things that you can use in your daily life. That was something that was missing. And the third was access. The ability to actually get these products, available easily. And also very importantly for sport is in a timely manner, because sport apparel and merchandise is also extremely unique if you think about it, right? The relevance of a Gujarat Titans jersey or a limited edition Gujarat Titans Champions tee the week after they won the IPL is significantly different than 6 months after. So the ability to have the infrastructure to create this kind of topical kind of usage of these products and provide them to consumers, that access system was also missing. So we felt that we could address all of that. And that's why we kind of started, the shop, FanCode shop. And, we have 9 out of 10 IPL teams products on the shop. We've actually worked with 7 teams to build mega stores within their ecosystems. We've partnered with the ICC as the official merch partner for the ICC World Cups in India. We also have partnerships with, a ton of football teams globally, including FC Barcelona, Manchester City, Juventus, and a whole lot of products which we have in the market. So, yeah, we think that, again, like any other startup industry, this is not like a 12-month, 18-month kind of plan. The industry needs to be invested in. And I think we've already seen like kind of, when I was watching the India-Australia final, a World Cup final, which unfortunately India lost, but when you're watching, there was just a sea of blue. And the reality was a lot of the blue was official merchandise. And we know because we sold a lot of it, right? So there was obviously, if you address the affordability, wearability, and accessibility, we felt that consumers were willing to buy because they were passionate. They wanted to wear official merch. So we just think that it needs time and it needs to be invested in over a period of time. But we believe that this is a problem worth solving, and this is a problem that we can, impact in a very positive way for consumers.
I had no idea that was the case. If I had looked out at that crowd and seen that sea of blue that you referred to, I would have assumed that a majority of those were just replicas. But the fact that they're licensed and that actually a lot of them were being purchased by people from FanCode, I think that's incredible. Is that a trend that we can expect to see going into the future? People buying this authentic licensed merch from FanCode for future big sporting events?
Yeah, I think we've, as I said earlier, it's just a start. It's a very new kind of industry. But I think we believe that it requires a lot of work, a lot of investment. We've actually continued to partner with the ICC. So the T20 World Cup, which is happening this year, will have the entire T20 World Cup merch store will be run by FanCode. And we'll have this entire range of products of the India team, the jerseys, fan jerseys, caps, mugs, bottles, basically a lot of ways for consumers to express the passion that they have, like the fandom that they have through official merch. And we've seen that this is something that, as you said, that consumers, if you address the problem of affordability and you make sure that consumers have ranges to be able to consumers want to buy authentic stuff. They want to have, there is pride in wearing something which is officially licensed because of the connection they have with the teams also.
Apart from different, buying experiences, I know you guys are also exploring different viewing experiences too. Like for me, I'm not a big sports guy, but when I have watched sports, personally, I love to sit down on the couch and look at a big flat screen TV, right? For me, being on my phone, that's just not my personal preference. Is that something that you're also exploring, sort of moving more in the direction of, or at least, opening up the possibility of people viewing sports through FanCode on connected TVs and smart TVs?
Yeah, I think when we are addressing the problem of access, right, I think, we keep reminding ourselves, it's not about doing only what the majority want. It's about addressing every single fan. So for us, we would be failing in our mission if we weren't able to provide that access to every single sports fan that we're providing the content to. So connected TV is a very important part of a user experience. In fact, we find some users watch on mobile while they're traveling, and then they switch to connected TVs when they get home. So it is something that we've continued to work a lot on. I know we've been part of a Google TV program also, where we've essentially tried to build the product and make it more visible and easily accessible in the Google TV ecosystem. So that's something that we work closely with them also. And we're going to continue working on experiences across platforms so that sports fans, wherever they view our content, they walk out saying that, hey, wow, this was a great experience of watching the game I loved on FanCode.
One interesting piece of the story, a future piece of the story, is the rest of the world, right? I know up until this point, you have been exclusively focusing on India, sports, audience, everything is India-centric, whereas in the future, there is actually potential, I believe, to look at this from a more global perspective. In what ways are you guys looking at this right now? I'm not sure if there's any runs on the board, but just tell me a little bit about future plans.
Yeah, I think, when we set up to solve the core problem that we've always spoken about solving, right, is access to content that sports fans love, which they don't have, right? We think that's a massive problem in India, and we've obviously invested close to 5 years in continuing to solve that. We think there's lots more headroom as sports fandom grows in this country. There's a lot more to do here to be able to solve that problem and cater to the audiences, especially younger audiences who are going from kids who learn to play sport to actually follow sport as they go older. But one of the things that we know that is another great opportunity is that the service, right, the tech product stack is essentially scalable globally. So we will always constantly look for, can we solve the same problem for users in another country? And we're going to constantly look at opportunities to do that. We think that, and I personally, as I've always said, that there is so much in sport that is a compelling proposition for consumers. So sports fandom is something that is not going to, is only going to continue increasing in the years to come in India and across the world. And, for us, it's really exciting to be able to be in this industry where the challenge is how do you actually serve all these consumers in India and sports fans as we kind of find opportunities to expand across everywhere we go.
That was Yannick Colaço, co-founder of FanCode. And by the way, I had a very important question that I needed to ask Yannick, but I knew that it would be polarizing, so I left it till the end.
If you had to choose one sport to watch for the rest of your life and you couldn't watch anything else, what sport would it be?
And that's really difficult because I love so many sports, right? But if I had to if you had to kind of put me on the spot and say one sport, it would be like basketball. And for me, it's like watching a professional basketball game is when you watch this 5 guys who are extremely athletic and talented, all coming together, running plays, trying to find a way to score a basket against these 5 other people, the opposition team, who are defending. Every play they run, every screen they run, every back cut, they're trying to react to stop them from scoring the basket. And everything is in 24 seconds. I think that adrenaline, the excitement in that is something that is I just love. So I just love watching basketball, and in particular the NBA.
Thank you so much for watching or listening to this episode of Millionaire Mondays, and also a huge thanks to this podcast sponsor, Google Play. All right, I will catch you in the next one.